Oh boy, Division. It's that time again when we get some new content, and well, quite frankly, I'm fucking thrilled because despite the fact that this game is enormously repetitive, it's super grindy, there isn't really a ton of depth to the story like a lot of people had been hoping for at launch. Despite all of those things, for some reason, I can't quite explain it, this game has held me in its grasp for almost 200 hours at this point. Now, granted, there was a time between, I believe, patches 1.2 and 1.4 that I took a big break from the game. Everything felt very broken. There wasn't a ton of stuff to do at the end game, and quite frankly, I didn't entirely understand the idea of just constantly grinding and grinding to min-max your character and stuff like that, which is something that I do a lot now, which is one of the most enjoyable parts of the game for me. Now, granted, I can understand those of you who don't like that kind of gameplay because, as I said, it is repetitive, you are doing the same actions over and over again, but regardless of that, I still enjoy it. But anyways, guys, today I'm not here to talk about any of the shit that everyone who plays Division already knows about. I'm here to talk about the 1.6 patch, which is currently running on the player test server environment for anyone who owns the season pass to download and test out early. There's no current release date as far as I'm aware for this patch to be pushed to the live servers, so for those of you who are just going to wait for that, that could be a little bit longer. Supposedly there was a leaked date for January 28th for Last Stand to be launching, but at the same time, considering they just launched 1.6 on the PTS on January 24th, it seems a little bit ridiculous that they would be flipping it over that quickly, because at this point it's more like, oh, basically if you bought the season pass, you just got early access to the next patch. Like, what are they gonna fix in those 4 days? But then again, I don't know entirely what's going on there, so I'm going to try to abstain from judging their methods quite so early. Now, the few things that I want to talk about are some of the changes which everyone who plays Division has been talking about, but I also want to give a little bit of my opinions on them and what I see that could potentially be broken, what could potentially be very beneficial for the game. Now, currently on the 24th, the only real big changes that are currently live on the PTS are the added Dark Zone areas, changing named weapons over to exotics, which basically causes Alpha Bridge to be not quite as OP as it used to be, although I will still say that I was quickly able to swap in something that I had in my stash to give my primary weapon an extra talent that made it almost as powerful as the one that I had before. Since I used to be running a FAMAS in the secondary slot, I was able to slap in an enhanced G36 or whatever the fuck it's called, and basically buff my damage back up to almost the same tier that it was with that FAMAS. Granted, perhaps I just rolled a shit FAMAS, but regardless of that, I was able to overcome that pretty quickly, and I didn't notice anything terribly different about it. They didn't re-roll any of the armor stats or anything like that, so it didn't seem like they critically debuffed Alpha Bridge. So for those of you who like Alpha Bridge, you're fucking in luck. This shit still works great. Another thing I noticed is that, I mean, granted, this could just be the fact that it's PTS, so once it's gone over to live, everyone's characters will be reset to the way were before, but everyone is PvPing in the new Dark Zone areas. It's pretty much a constant that everyone just sort of shoots each other on sight, which part of this is because it seems like people are trying to test out the new mechanics, and also it seems like the added incentive of not dropping anything if you're not rogue makes people more interested to go and hunt rogues, because they know if they are killed by the rogues, they won't lose anything unless they're, of course, carrying contaminated items, which makes sense, and quite frankly, I'm very, very happy about, because half the time I would just avoid rogues, because 99% of the time those rogues are either in a group of 4 or they're just so ludicrously overpowered or somehow bugged out or hacking or something that there's really no point to going and hunting rogues in the current live build. So now that I'm not afraid of losing my shit, it's kind of it makes it actually enjoyable to hunt rogues, which is something that this game has been missing out on for a long time, since when you go rogue, there is still a chance that you'll be hunted down, but it's a lot less likely due to the fact that most people just avoid it, considering how much XP and Dark Zone currency you currently lose on the live build. It's pretty fucking risky. I mean, honestly, there's no real incentive. Like, even if you kill those rogues, you will get a small amount of Dark Zone currency, and you will have pretty much risked a shit ton of your XP and currency just by going in there, and 90% of the time you're gonna end up dying anyways. So as for my stance on it, it's mostly on the live build completely fucking pointless to go and actually hunt rogues, which is really a shame because that can be some of the most intense gameplay currently available. Now, of course, I've still spent quite a bit of time playing the game, but I primarily PvE and stick out of the Dark Zone, you know, working towards min-maxing my characters, getting really good items for PvP content, hoping to one day be able to go into PvP, but granted, now with these changes in 1.6, it seems like I might be able to hop into PvP a bit more willingly without risking tons of stuff. Now, another thing I wanted to touch on, since there's only those two small portions of the game that are currently live on PTS, I wanted to mention, for starters, the new Dark Zone areas are gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. The level of detail remains from pretty much every other section of the game. I was afraid initially that when they started expanding these areas to such a large extent that they would kind of slack off on the level of detail and things like that, and let me tell you, that is not the case. In a lot of senses, they've kind of gone overboard, to be entirely honest. Like, certain areas that are inhabited by the cleaners and things like that, just heaps of trash bags piled up on the streets burning, just the intense atmosphere and just how fucked up this part of the city is. It's very obvious, and the environment, the music, the sound, everything comes together and plays perfectly into that atmosphere. It's absolutely beautiful, something that if you have the hardware to do it and the time to enjoy the game, I would 100% recommend playing through, because honestly, just exploring these new areas is super thrilling, and quite frankly, it's breathed new life into the atmosphere of the game that it's been needing for a very, very long time. Now, of course, in the current PTS build, that's pretty much where the focus of all the players are, so if you're really gonna go running around up there, chances are you're gonna run into rogues and stuff like that, and people testing out the new combat mechanics like the sprint on reload changes, all sorts of hip fire rebalances, just rebalancing weapons, the new exotic weapons, which are basically identical to the named weapons. They just fall into a different category, and their talents are affected differently by Alpha Bridge, like I previously mentioned. So basically what happens now is, instead of being able to slap a named weapon into your secondary slot and a named weapon in your primary to get shitloads of amazing talents using Alpha Bridge, anything that is named, since it's now classified as exotic, will no longer share talents via Alpha Bridge. So basically, while you can run an exotic weapon in your primary and get talents from non-exotic weapons in your secondary, you can no longer put an exotic weapon in that secondary slot and share that talent up to your primary weapon, whether it's exotic or not. This is one thing that I noticed immediately when hopping into the PTS when I looked at my DPS, and it was significantly decreased despite the fact that I was running the same build as the current live version, since it doesn't exactly indicate on the Alpha Bridge information that it doesn't translate talents from exotic weapons, but it's clearly been implemented fully at this point. Which, part of me thinks that this will make the game a bit more balanced and balance out Alpha Bridge as a gear set, but at the same time, I was, as I said, able to put a non-exotic weapon into that slot that pretty much buffed my DPS up to the point that it had already previously been at, which kind of defeats the purpose, to be entirely honest. Perhaps there are certain talents that were only on these exotic weapons that you will no longer be able to share that could potentially completely balance out Alpha Bridge, but unless they do something to significantly lower one of its other stats, perhaps the stamina stat, and make it a bit more of a glass cannon kind of gear set, I feel like this gear set is still going to be the primary gear set that people sort of gravitate towards due to the fact that it really hasn't been nerfed all that well. I can tell you for almost certainty that as long as they can keep it the way that it is now, even without the exotic talent sharing, I will continue to use Alpha Bridge primarily in PvE and sometimes in PvP scenarios. Now, like I mentioned, they also did a change that causes it so that you cannot be able to sprint and reload at the same time, and one of the things that I've heard mentioned and thrown about is the fact that in Dark Zone, now if you're being hunted by rogues or you are rogue and people are chasing you, it'll be harder for them to really catch you because they can't continuously fire and reload and sprint and keep up with you. So if you are continuously sprinting to try and get away from them, you will eventually escape because they'll have to slow down to reload every time they run out of ammunition, which at least for me seems like a welcome change because I'm usually a little bitch and I usually run away from people in the Dark Zone because I for the longest time didn't have gear that was up to par with everyone else. Now, of course, after the time that I've been playing over the past couple weeks, I've finally gotten to the point where I can actually hold my own as long as they're not fucking hacking or lag to shit to the point where all of their damage gets applied at once, which, shout out Ubisoft, that's still a problem. But regardless of that, we're still going to have to wait and see how Last Stand turns out as an expansion. I'm honestly really looking forward to having somewhere that I can go and do sort of enclosed PvP where there's a game mode that is specifically designed for PvP, where I can learn all of those different tactics and stuff that a lot of the more veteran Dark Zone players have learned just simply by playing a lot of Dark Zone. I'm looking forward to having somewhere that I can go exclusively to figure out what is, you know, really best in a lot of scenarios, because I have been so afraid of actually going into PvP in the Dark Zone for fear of losing a lot of my items that I never really got particularly good at it. So now that there is going to be a dedicated PvP game mode, I'm honestly really looking forward to that. And of course, all of the skills that you can learn in this new game mode can be translated over to the Dark Zone as well as survival PvP, since obviously the main focus of survival now is that PvP version of it, because that's where everything is the most intense. But if you've learned all of those strategies and started to work on your specific builds, you can then translate those over to survival, those same strategies, not obviously your gear sets, but you can start to learn a lot of those tactics that you use in these other PvP game modes, and they can translate over there, which will help you a lot in the long run. Anyways, guys, that's just a brief touch on my opinions on the 1.6 PTS. I'm really looking forward to this being pushed to live, because currently the servers are so fucking bogged down that you get kicked out like every 20 minutes. So hopefully that'll be pushed over pretty soon. I would love to see those on the full servers so that everyone can play them and we're not worrying about connectivity issues, as well as the Last Stand DLC that actually seems very interesting and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed. I know it's a bit different from my usual content, but regardless of that, if you enjoyed the video, if you would please slap a like on it, I would really appreciate it. If you are here or you're new or whatever and you like Division content, I would love it if you'd subscribe as well as like this video, so I can know that, you know, there are people who watch this shit and enjoy it, because I love playing the Division. It's probably the game that I play the most at the moment, but regardless of that, I really do appreciate you stopping by, and I'll see you guys in the next one.